Hello, my name is Mary Beauchamp, and welcome to the Ketogenic Diet Show. Today, I'm here with a very, very special guest, Elise Pronto. Thank you so much for joining me, Elise. She's like a muse to me because she is so committed to her health. And we started working together many years ago, and she's going to tell us her journey, her story of how she got to where she is. She has overcome some incredible hurdles in her health. And between us, we have been committed to finding answers and digging and digging and digging. And there's always those people that you work with that say, you know, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And Elise is one of those people. She's a nutritional therapy consultant, and you can find her at Pronto Health Coaching now. She has taken this on to the next level to help other people to overcome their health challenges. I am thrilled to introduce you, Elise, today. And I'd love for you to start just by sharing a little bit about your story and what sort of brought you to this place where you are today.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the beginning of where it all started. I had some traumatic childhood experiences, which, as I know now, contribute to stress in the human body. And I would say that's when my symptoms started as a very young child. So I had chronic ear infections starting when I was really young. And my ear infections began around 5 years old, I would say, maybe 4 or 5. And then, of course, what do? You bring your child to a doctor, and the doctor prescribes you antibiotics. So from a very young age, I started taking rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics. And the doctor said that they wanted to do a surgery, which was putting tubes in my ears. And luckily, my mother, Mary Beauchamp, RN, said no to this procedure. Thank God. And also, I was raised vegetarian. And so that's when my symptoms started, just from the very, very beginning. I had chronic inflammation. The earaches really persisted, sore throats. I had so much trouble in school, and I had so much trouble concentrating. You could say I had a learning disability. I was maybe on the spectrum. I had probably ADHD. So my first grade teacher wanted to hold me back in first grade. So that's when I got involved in the Waldorf school and kind of changed my education trajectory. As a child, I just remember having it felt like my head was in the clouds, like all the time. I was kind of underwater, and I probably was like in fluid in my ears. I probably had fluid in my ears. I still have those chronic earaches. So fast forward to puberty. That's when I started getting really bad acne. It started off slow, and I was still acting out a lot. I still was eating horrible foods, and the eating also started to be more addictive. And I think that's when my first addictive behaviors came out. It really started with food. I never was the type of person to have one cookie. I would have the whole box, and this is when my addictive behaviors really picked up and progressed, and I was surely addicted to sugar at this point. I ate a lot of fast food, continued to struggle in high school, started to get in trouble, acting out even more, and engaged in some reckless behavior. I ate a lot of fast food. I started partying, just really reckless and not taking care of my body. I got pregnant with my daughter, and I was living a pretty unhealthy lifestyle at that point. And I knew that I needed to do something because I wasn't feeling great. And I also really wanted to know how to nourish and take care of this new baby. And so I started doing a lot of research. I was also raised in a household where health and nutrition was the forefront. And so I had a bit of a foundation. However, we were very much plant-based my entire life. Health and nutrition in my home evolved as I grew up. So, and I'm the eldest of four. So it was more in my teenage years that you got more into the animal-based eating. But before that, we were very much plant-based. So yeah, I started doing research, and I read every book I could get my hands on natural childbirth, on how to nourish a baby, and I read Nourishing Traditions and written by Sally Fallon Morell. I read, yeah, natural childbirthing books, and I decided I wanted a home birth, and so I did that, and I had a beautiful home birth. It came with its challenges, of course, but that's really when I started to dive deeper into what it means to be healthy and how I could support my own health and the health of my baby. I'd switched over to more of a holistic diet, but I still was having a lot of symptoms. And it wasn't till I moved to Germany with my husband. We're fast forwarding through this story a little bit, but I got pregnant with my son. We moved to Germany, and that's kind of when my symptoms really picked up. I was stressed. I had a new baby, and I was still really struggling with severe acne. And because of the stress, I developed gastritis. And gastritis is when the lining of your stomach becomes inflamed. So it's really painful. I had blood in my stool. I was struggling with depression, and that kind of progressively got worse as well because I just kind of felt like I was dropped into this new country, and I had no family, and my husband was studying, so it was really hard, and I was super lonely, and I didn't know the language at all, so it was really intimidating for me. My depression and my addictive behaviors were coming out full force. I was stressed and anxious and depressed. So my breakouts started getting worse. My gastritis was getting worse, and I ended up in the hospital, and I was pooping blood. I started to dig and dig and dig because, when you go to the hospital or a doctor, they do nothing but tell you, okay, well, you can have surgery or you can take a pill. And I knew I didn't want to do that. And I also knew that I wanted to be available and like strong for my kids. And I found this incredible book that I still refer to today, called the GAPS Gut and Psychology Syndrome book, written by Natasha Campbell McBride. And I was so excited because it was like I hit the holy grail with that book. I read it instantly, and I started the gut healing protocol. And this is really when my health shifted for the better. I read the book. I started the intro diet, which was healing and sealing the gut with bone broth. I saw some really amazing results. I was really dedicated to my health at this point. I was still not making some pretty fundamental correlations between inflammation, addiction, depression, anxiety, and I still had inflammation cropping up. My acne was persistent. I was still incorporating a lot of plants and nuts and seeds and seed oils, and I was juicing, and I was still inflamed. So I started with a keto diet, which really was amazing for me for a very long time. I want to also mention that I had ovarian cysts that were extremely painful, and they would pop. And I forgot to mention this before, but I had those far before I moved to Germany. So this was, yeah, years and years I had cysts on my ovaries that would pop, and just the excruciating pain. So that all to say, like, I had like chronic inflammation. So keto actually helped put a lot of these symptoms in remission because keto helps with inflammation, but I was still having symptoms, and I didn't know why. I felt great. So I was loving keto, and I was living in a house that had toxic black mold. I did not know this, and I was being poisoned and I was so, so sick. So all of the symptoms that I was having and experiencing that I already have mentioned were compounded by this. So then I started to have worse symptoms. So I had worse skin breakouts. I had horrible earaches. I had my eardrum popped. I was bleeding out of my ear. I had chronic sinus infections. I had headaches. My eyes were like, I looked like the Walking Dead because I thought I was going to die. One day I walked out and I told my husband I'm dying. And I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I am dying. He broke the wall in my room because I insisted that there was mold there. And there was black mold all behind my bed. So, and I also forgot to mention that I ended up in the hospital because I had my appendix was swollen or inflamed because of the mold, and mold lives in your organs and it ends up proliferating and multiplying in your mucous membranes. So that's when I started to find out more and more and more about why I had these horrible sinus infections, why my eardrum burst, why my appendix was swollen, because it was living in my mucous membranes. I had horrible candida and I didn't eat an ounce of sugar, like at all. I was a freak about my diet. I didn't even have fruit. My ketones were so high all the time. I had basically my whole head and neck was infected and chronically inflamed. So I had chronic strep throat. I would have fevers for weeks. I would be in bed. I couldn't move. I had symptoms of MS. I had symptoms of Lyme's. But I was tested and there were no results. No doctor could help me. And I was at a loss. Like, this was a devastating time in my life, like, absolutely devastating, because I was dying and I had two kids that I wanted to help, but I couldn't, like, I didn't have the energy. I had no energy. I had the worst symptoms. Like, it was just incredibly painful. Let's just put it that way. So I ended up in the hospital because I went to a doctor and he said there are two different tests you can do, but the one that he did indicated that my appendix was about to rupture. So I was rushed to the ER and they did a ultrasound before they were going to do emergency surgery, and my appendix was fine. So it wasn't fine. My body was onto something. I had toxic mold poisoning, really hardcore. Mycotoxins live in your organs, they inflame your organs, and mycotoxins live in your mucous membranes. During this period of time, these years that I was living in this mold house, I was feeling so much better with keto, and I had done so much research, and I had a real passion for nutrition. So during the 3.5 years that I was living in this house, I actually managed to study and go to school to become a nutritional therapy consultant. How I managed to study and, like, think somewhat clearly, I don't know. It boggles my mind, but I managed to get through, and I was still kind of foggy, like under the water. That's how it feels. That's how it felt all the time. It wasn't all at once that I felt like crap. This was years of a buildup of, like, all the symptoms I just described to you. So then spring comes, and then you open your windows, and the warm breeze comes in, and then the mold spores poof all over. So in the springtime, every year and summer, when my windows were open, I was dying. Like, I I got sick. I didn't understand why I kept getting sick, like, when you should be getting better, like, when bacteria and viruses usually go more dormant because the sun is shining and the climate warms up. I was getting brutally sick. So then I kind of felt like I studied this. I've been studying this for years, and why am I so sick? So I began to kind of feel like a fraud. Like I didn't know how to help people because I couldn't even help myself. I had major imposter syndrome because I had done all this studying, and I at one point I felt great, and I thought I had the answers, and I thought I had tackled this, right? I started to feel better, and then all of a sudden I just couldn't get well. And this was due to the mycotoxin poisoning, and I didn't get it, so I had severe imposter syndrome. Plus, my brain was so fogged. I had memory loss. Like every symptom you Google for mold poisoning, I had it. So I just couldn't seem to like get a hold on my life. My depression was horrendous. My addictions were getting worse. My cravings, like you name it, it was just awful. It was a living hell. Um, so I found out I had that, and I was like, okay, well, I know what to do. I left like that weekend. I moved into my neighbor's house. I started researching along with your support and your help. We started like, yeah, we started digging and realized like, okay, well, you have to get out. So we started getting the whole family out. And then it was a process. I mean, here in Germany, you can't just say your house is infested with mold. We're moving out. Like it was a whole process. So anyhow, I lived with my neighbor for like 3 months. My kids slowly moved out because I realized they need to be out of the house too. We found a we found an apartment in the mountains of Bavaria. That's where we live now. So super blessed that we were able to move here. So now I live in the Alps, the fresh alpine air. We moved to the mountains. We moved completely across the country. We moved from Baden-Württemberg, which is on the border of France, to Bayern, we're now on the border of Austria. So we spent the next 3 months packing and cleaning and sorting. And I, on the one hand, was so relieved that I figured it out. I started immediately feeling better. Like I mean, it's amazing. As I started doing more and more research, we realized mold is one of those relentless, lingering pests. It's a lot more work than just moving out. So we thought moving out was hard, but I had a lot more work to do, and I felt so sick that I was willing to do anything. I didn't think my why could get any stronger, but it sure as hell did. I mean, my why was strong, 7 years ago. That's why I started researching health and wellness and developing my skills as a practitioner today, because my why was strong. And I didn't really think it could get stronger, but it sure could. And God has a funny way of has a sense of humor, that's for sure. I had a lot of work to do with getting rid of this mold. There are specific protocols that you have to do, and one of those things is to take a binder 3 times a day. And it was a half an hour before you eat or an hour after you eat. And I was on a lot of supplements. Also, I had a biopsy for cervical cancer, and the doctor said, and he was super nice, and I totally believe him. He said, you're most likely going to need a surgery. We're probably going to at least have to remove your cervix. And it looks like it's possible that we might have to do a hysterectomy. And I was, again, my why couldn't have gotten stronger. And, there are points through my story where I felt completely hopeless, just defeated, like completely defeated. I felt like I kept doing the next right thing, picking myself up. And then there was the next thing.
So not only were you dealing with toxic mold poisoning, detoxifying from that, then on top of that, what the mold will do is it shuts down your immune system. So that's
Mhm.
why the chronic sore throats, the chronic earaches, the chronic infections, constant infections going on in the body because your immune system shuts down. At some point, it's so overwhelmed trying to get rid of the toxic mold out of your body that it just can't get rid of viruses and bacteria as easily. And of course, then there's a pandemic. So this was not a good time to have your immune system shut down at all. And so then what that does also, it creates a susceptibility for cancer cells to take over. After a lot of digging, we found a specialist who could help with the mold detoxification process, which was a godsend. That was like a miracle.
This is an important piece. If you are listening to this podcast and you think that you have been exposed to black mold, the protocol is called the Dr. Shoemaker protocol, and I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend looking into it because it is known to detoxify mycotoxins, and there's a whole testing protocol that they set you up with. I failed it. The vision test, if you fail, indicates that you have chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which I had. The abbreviation is CIRS. And if you have this, which you could look back at my life, and pretty much guarantee that I was going to have chronic inflammatory response syndrome because of all of my chronic inflammatory disease and ailments that I had my whole life. If you have this, you are one of the lucky ones that is affected by mycotoxins, like severely affected by mycotoxins, brown recluse bites, and tick bites. They say it's your brain on fire because it's inflammation that is impacting their brain. And I had, as I said, I was dizzy. I had blurry vision. And then, not to mention, like my sinuses were so swollen all the time that it felt like my brain was going to explode. I came here, I moved, and I found a doctor, a naturopathic doctor that was highly recommended. And he used a protocol called procaine. And he did procaine injections. And he injected me with procaine into my abdomen to reduce inflammation on my ovaries. And what happened is he punctured a artery. I internally bled, and I didn't know what was happening at first, but I ended up going home. And that night I basically dropped to the floor and I called you, and I was like, okay, I'm passing out. I don't know what's wrong. I have excruciating pain in my abdomen. And I just lied there, and I was bleeding out internally and I had no idea. My neighbors ended up putting me in the back of their car. My husband wasn't here yet because he was still moving in the other side of the country, and I was alone here actually at that point in time. So my husband actually called the neighbors. The neighbors loaded me in the car, and I went to the hospital. So they found with the scanning that I had a hematome. That's what they call it here. I don't know. It's internal bleeding, and what happens is it's basically like a blister that builds inside, and it's full of blood. Of course, I had really high CRPs. I had infection going on. Well, I had high CRPs to begin with, but because I had high CRPs, which is chronic inflammatory response, they wanted to put me on intravenous antibiotics, of course, naturally. So I'm in the hospital and I'm on intravenous antibiotics, more antibiotics for my body. That was another experience for sure. So I was in the hospital a week and a half, 2 weeks, and they monitored the internal bleeding to make sure it didn't rupture again, because it kept kind of rupturing, and then my heart rate would go up really high and blood pressure would be really low, and it was just like a total mess. So they kept me in for observation, and I was on antibiotics to make sure I didn't get an infection. And it was just more fuel to my fire that was going on. Clearly something wasn't working with my diet. A lot of the mold protocol diets are, well, all of them, in fact, when you become exposed to mold and you are dealing with mycotoxin poisoning, there is a very specific diet that you need to do. And it's eliminating any foods that have molds. So obviously mushrooms are a no-no because that's a mold. So any hard cheeses, any grains, any nut butter, right? So this was where I started questioning certain foods that I was eating religiously in my healthy diet previously. Any berries, because berries often mold when they're sitting in the package, or even still on the plant itself. Coffee is one of the highest foods in mycotoxins. So that's just a few.
So all your favorite keto healthy foods were now in question.
Yeah, dairy, I think. So I'll just continue on with kind of what happened with these discoveries. All of the mold, all the research that we did had a specific mold diet protocol, and it eliminates all foods that contain any traces of mold. So I ended up doing that and questioning the foods that I was eating, because nut butters were like a staple in my keto diet. It wasn't long after that I was turned onto the carnivore diet, and this was really shocking to me because my diet was plant-based. I thought I was doing my body a favor all these years, drinking green smoothies, juicing, eating the nut butters, and really come to find out I was actually like damaging my body.
We're looking at oxalates, lectins, and phytates that are really heavy in many plant foods. These are poisonous toxins that get into the body, and they also cannot get out. They build up, they compromise your immune system, your organs, your lymph nodes, your joints, and your brain. So obviously we know gluten is a very famous lectin. All plants have toxins, some way more than others. So make sure that you're aware of these plants that are heavily toxic, because I can't tell you how many people are struggling with this and don't know it. So what we've discovered through this is that there are things that we can do, but you have to be willing to do whatever it takes. And, I don't think somebody comes up with, only wanting to eat meat or animal products and animal fat because they want to, We didn't ever set out to do this because it sounded like a really delicious thing to do, right? This is what people do after they've literally just have tried everything. So kudos to you, Elise, for being that person and showing me what that can do. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to be this extreme with their diet. Most people can just simply cut out processed foods and sugar and seed oils, and they would feel 80% better. It's a very small percentage of the population that's going to have to go to this level of, extreme dieting to get results. And then maybe there's some people that just say, hey, I want to optimize my health. I want to feel the best I possibly can. And I don't really care what I have to do. I'm going to do anything. So you're one of those people, and thank you for your incredible inspiration that you've given to me. So just keep going with where you were.
Yeah, well,
I think you were.
As you were talking, like what came up for me was something that I feel like I should hit on too. And that is, during this hopeless time when I didn't know what to do, I was able to really connect with my higher power for the first time. I just needed help, and I didn't know what to do. Like when you are so desperate and you are dying, you will do crazy things like pray to a higher power that you have no relationship with. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. And that's when the answer started coming, and it kind of tears me up because I was so desperate. So that's when I I started getting, I don't want to say downloads, but it was just like, I knew something was helping me. And I, that's when I took the steps forward to like break the wall down, like quite literally, like there's mold behind there, trust in yourself. And so I did, and I did something about it. And I don't know if I could have done that without connecting with my higher power. Um, I decided, um, I was completely done drinking alcohol at that point. And I haven't taken a sip of alcohol in a year and a half now. And it's like the best decision I ever made to have like a sober lifestyle, sober mind all the time. And then fast forward to also mold is extremely high in wine and beer and anything yeasty, right? Giving those things up even before I found that out was pretty awesome, because it was like another confirmation that I had something working with me and I wasn't alone. And it gave me a sense of power. You know, it was just like, I can do this. I'm not alone. And I think that that's so important to bring into the conversation, because for me, it became spiritual. It wasn't a mindset thing anymore. It was like it was an all around experience that I was going through. Like, it was definitely spiritual. So I had to keep praying, and I really relied on that. I relied on my meditation. I relied on my prayers, and I began to understand that there was something helping me. And even in those hardest times, I kept on doing that. So when I then got the cancer diagnosis and I was in the hospital again for getting the puncture to my abdomen, I kept praying. And my spiritual practice really picked up. And that's what helped me get through all of these things. I didn't do it alone. And I just really want to stress that, because I don't think we can do this alone. And we have to tap into something greater than ourselves. And we have to tap in to an outside source that can give us help and inspiration. So that's just really important for me that I mentioned that, because I don't think I'd be where I am today if I hadn't made that decision a year and a half ago to throw my hands up and say, I can't do this. I need help. And so I think that's so important. So this process hasn't just been a mental, physical thing. This has been emotional, spiritual, mental, physical, everything combined. And I had to grow on all of those levels, not just one. And I don't think it ever is just one. I think we just think it is. So through all of these experiences, it's like I've just been I believe my higher power is helping me, receive a message here, receive a message there, do this thing. And it's an intuition, right? I mean, that's what we call our intuition, is our internal knowing. And I think that I connect with that more when I'm meditating. So, and it's really important for me to focus on that, because I forget, and it's easy to forget not to meditate and connect with your inner guidance system. So with that said, I think that a lot of the information that I've received has just been divine, like a divine intervention here, a divine intervention there. And none of these experiences that have happened to me, I would change, because I am who I am today because of all of those experiences. So with that said, one of those divine interventions was learning that plants had these toxins, lectins, oxalates, phytates, that were actually harmful. And I believe they were harming me because even though I had been trying all the diets, I was still suffering. So when I was in the hospital, actually, is when I decided that that's the route I was going to take. So I started eliminating so many of these plant toxins. And oh my gosh, I just want to mention like what they feed you in a hospital. It's horrific. I don't know how. I was in a ward with two older women that just went through breast cancer. And it was just pretty horrifying to see what they were eating and what they were serving these poor women. I mean, talk about suffering. That gave me some perspective too. It's like every experience gives me so much perspective. They would eat 2 rolls, white bread rolls, some like bologna or some sort of meat cut, processed meat cut, a dessert like a pudding or a cake or a cookie, maybe like a little small little salad with like a vinaigrette, probably with sunflower oil and processed sugar, probably high fructose corn syrup. So it was horrifying to see this. So I was eating butter, and I had my mother-in-law deliver me some food, and thank God she flew in to help us move, and she brought me some food, and I just ate a stick of butter, and it was odd for them to see me eat. Let's just put it that way. I lived off of butter in the hospital. That was my saving grace, is having that butter. I had already experienced eating a really high fat diet because I was keto for so long. Years I was in keto, and I had really high ketones. Like on a regular basis, I had ketones six, and regular on a normal day, my ketones were 4.6 usually. So I was really familiar and fat adapted at that point. So my metabolism shifts really quickly now into ketosis. So I actually have to be diligent about eating enough and incorporating honey or some carbohydrates to make sure I'm keto cycling and not always in ketosis, because that's damaging, and that is maybe for another podcast. But so that's when I kind of started down this rabbit hole of the carnivore diet. And I don't even know if I want to call it carnivore, but it's really just a human diet. And when I started to do the research and look into this even more, it was like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. So I started doing elimination, right? I took out the nut butters, I took out the starches, I took out the fibers, and I started feeling so good. I incorporated, and here's the most important part, I think, about explaining this diet, or this animal-based shift that I transitioned into, was I started eating organ meats. I started eating raw liver. I started eating raw kidney. I started eating brain. I ate testicles. I ate animal meat. I made broths I was making broths for years before, but I continued to do that. I started feeling so much better. I started exercising as well in there, which helped. Exercise is a huge part of my journey too, because that's what gives me those endorphins that I really need. Take away all my other addictions, like take away the chocolate, take away the wine, take away tobacco, take away all those things. You need some endorphins somewhere. And that's been key to my healing. So I incorporated exercise too, because this, again, going back to this, is like a species appropriate diet. This is the human diet. This is the way our ancestors have eaten for millennia, right? And our ancestors moved. We weren't sedentary. We were always in movement. So I started to think of myself as if I were my ancestors. What would I do? How would I move? How would I sit? What would I eat? That was a big question. I started feeling better, and I have to say, I think, what is it now? 9 months, maybe? No, I think it's like 8 months now on a carnivore diet. I still, on a regular basis, I'm getting organs. I even have been experimenting with drinking beef blood, and because that's an immune booster right there. That's what people did to boost their immune systems back in the day. And quite frankly, like we were talking about the other day, I feel extremely duped by the medical system, because here's a solution. There's this like secret society where there's research, there's science that knows this, yet we don't know it. We are taught the pyramid in school with carbohydrates down here, sugar here. Yeah. So anyways, we're taught the exact opposite of protein and fat being the predominant portion of your meals. So yeah, I mean, so far it's been an absolute God sent transformation that it's just completely transformed my health. I feel better. Honestly, I feel better today than I ever have in my entire life. Like just figuring out how to get my inflammation under control and taking away the plant toxins. Again, the oxalates, the lectins. I was still heavy into eating salads and green juices and nut butters and packing seeds on my salads, etc. Taking those out of my diet was key for me, because I believe that I think that it was increasing my inflammation significantly. So since I started, I feel like my health has improved like so much, and I feel like a normal person. Like I feel like a human that can move and be and think clearly. So I'm excited to just keep going down this path and even get stronger and better. And yeah.
And you look so good. I mean, you just look amazing and glowing and confident. And it's so beautiful to see and hear your story, Elise. I know that there's actually so much more to the story. I wanted you to give an update a little bit on what happened. So simultaneously, you're doing this mold detox. You've moved across the country. You totally changed your diet again, and then you get this cancer diagnosis.
I got that diagnosis and I was devastated again. I was just like, how can this be that I'm 31 years old and I don't want to have my uterus removed. I don't want to have surgery. But again, I want to go back to that I created a spiritual practice, and that was so important for me to have at that time. I knew that I had to give that up, that piece of like, I had no control over that. What I could only do my best. So I kept doing my best. I kept just praying about it, and I kept on being like a drastic carnivore, like incorporating, eating the organs and doing some fasting. And so I went in for the results, and the doctor, he said he was like really surprised. He was like, I could have swore you would have to have a surgery. And the results say that you don't need one. So I was
literally the cancer was gone.
That I don't know. I think he didn't even know. He was just like, I took samples of where I thought you had cancer. And
the biopsy.
Yeah. He took samples of where, he's, and this is like a guy that's been doing this for years. Like he's the only guy in our region that can do colposcopies, which is where they take a sample of your cervix or uterus. So he specializes in this. He's an older guy. So, he was taken aback by the results.
He also said that he didn't recommend that you do anything alternative because he doesn't see that works in most of the time. Things get worse, and that he felt that you should handle it very quickly and swiftly. And you had expressed to him that you didn't want to do that. You wanted some time to heal, and that was really just such a beautiful way that you were following your intuition about that and saying, I hear you, and I don't want to do that. I want to give my body some time to heal, and then I will come back. And that was amazing. And in that period of time, we also were able to connect you with some incredible naturopathic oncologists who are in the Northern California area that were also supporting you through this.
Yeah, and I'm sure after this podcast, I'm going to think of 10 other things that I had symptoms of and was dealing with, like anemia. Like, I just forgot to mention that my periods were super heavy, really uncomfortable, debilitating. And my hormones were, when I got tested, were fine, right? So all the gynecologists that I saw over the years, which was many, because I was like, why do I have acne? Why are my periods so bad? What they would say is, well, you should get on the pill. Well, I was on the pill when I was younger, and it made me crazy. So I got off of the pill and I got an IUD. Then the IUD hurt. It hurt my cervix. They hurt my, it just hurt. And so I got that out. And then we went down other routes of birth control. And luckily my husband got a vasectomy, and he was like, all right, well, I'll do it, so you don't have to deal with it. So, and I think that's another important piece, is like, come on, men, like, why aren't more men taking on the role of, figuring out birth control? But that's a whole nother topic. This is where I feel duped again by the system. So every time I have something, they're like, well, take a pill, take the pills. Even, and I hate to say it, but even naturopathic doctors are like, pay for the hundreds of dollars worth of, or euros worth of supplements, and pay for the infusion. I mean, every iron infusion that I got, which I was convinced I needed, because I didn't know that I could go and eat liver and drink some blood and get an even better effect. So I paid $200 a pop for an iron infusion, and that wasn't even it. I paid for other infusions that they said I should get because of my blood work. So
because you were so depleted and so anemic, right? And what you're getting with those infusions is a synthetic form of iron, essentially, which isn't what you're getting with food. You're not getting that with real food, with real animal organs, which is bioavailable and easily absorbed and goes right into your cells, as opposed to having to be converted and all this other stuff that just doesn't absorb as well. So we cannot replace whole foods with synthetic vitamins and supplements. And
exactly. I mean, so again, so eating kale for iron is ridiculous, because kale is, you're not going to absorb the nutrients in kale because it's not bioavailable. And like you said, like the iron that I was getting was synthetic iron, and I could have just been paying $3 for a chunk of liver, and here I am, thousands of euros in debt because of medical bills. Mm-hmm. And I could have.
Did anybody ever say you should change your diet along the last 10 years of this?
No, not one doctor, even naturopathic doctors. And I got to give it to them for what they do, but I'm quite frankly flabbergasted that diet is not talked about. Like, it should be like a known fact. Like, yeah, there's these animal products right here for
Mhm.
you, and you can the fat will heal your brain, your nervous system, and then these organ meats are going to help boost your hemoglobin and your ferritin, and this blood over here, this is amazing because this blood is going to boost your immune system, and it's basically a liquid protein. Like, why is this not talked about, and why is this like the best kept secret? I feel inspired and extremely hopeful that I have found a a way of life. I mean, it's a way of life. And with that said,
It's
it's
a
like,
lifestyle. Absolutely. So this is a
it's,
lifestyle. This isn't a quick fix. This is not something that you just do for a couple of weeks. Yeah, I often have people ask me, well, how long do I have to eat this way? And I'm
yeah,
like, as long as you want to feel good, and you can't really go back, because once you go this far down the path, if you go back and start eating what you used to eat, you're not going to feel good
oh
at
my,
all.
yeah, no way. I made my family, so I cook for my family differently than I eat. But there are plants that are lower on the toxic spectrum. And those are the ones that I tend to lean towards when I'm going to make something with vegetables, say for my family. So I made like cabbage, carrots, and like something else. And I put it and steamed it in broth, added some salt. And I had some too. And, you know, through this experience, like I haven't had like a perfect experience. Like I've had trial and error because that's what we have to do. And so I had a bowl of this soup, and oh my gosh, I couldn't believe how bloated I got, and I couldn't believe like how awful my stomach felt. And just to think like I was eating like giant bowls of salads and stuff, and I didn't even realize how bloated I was because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, now it's like I have like a flat stomach, and I don't have any bloating. I don't have any constipation. And I don't know if I mentioned that before either, but I struggled with constipation for years, like
Mm.
really bad constipation. Um, Constipation where I got hemorrhoids and like hated pooping and bled every time I pooped. And that was also really bad in the mold too. So I'm sure there's a correlation there with the whole system, but um, I've had really smooth bowel movements. Yeah, it's been a real transformation. Let's just put it that way. So, like the myth around fiber is a whole nother topic, but we don't need fiber to poop. That's a myth. Like that is what we are told. Now, if you question that and if you look into that just a little further, you will find that we do not actually need fiber for a healthy microbiome. We do not need fiber to poop because I probably have a stronger, healthier microbiome than I ever had. And I poop better than I ever have. So, myth busted. And you can look at the science, you can look at the research if you choose to around this. It is there. And that's the other sort of it's just yeah, it's mind baffling to me that we it's this best kept secret. It's out there and there are studies. I just want to let everybody know there's great information out there. um, One of my favorite authors and doctors that I follow and who's been super inspiring to me is Dr. Paul Saladino. He wrote a book, the Carnivore Code, and it just inspired me. And I follow his work closely, and he actually just went and lived with the Hadzas, which is one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer tribes in the world. And his hypothesis was they're not living off of plant food. And he was
Mm-mm.
right. He went out and they utilize every piece of, they eat nose to tail. They eat some honey and they have the best health in the world too. They're known for their health. They have no dental cavities, the structures, their jaws, their mouths, the structures of their bone structure is impeccable. Um, and they aren't suffering from chronic disease as we see today. So they eat organs, they eat fat, they eat honey. They do dig for tubers, but they spit the fibrous parts out. And
Right. And
that is a distinction.
right. They don't swallow the fiber, and they also eat a lot of meat. So they eat the whole animal, right? Nose to tail, like you
Yeah,
said.
correct.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure how they utilize the bones or if they boil the bones. I don't think they make broth out of the bones. They do cook with fire.
They break the bones and they eat the marrow, and then they probably toss them to the dogs.
I will put links under this podcast video to all of these doctors that we've mentioned that we feel are on the cutting edge of the ancient way of eating prior to chronic disease. And this is the way that we're going to get back to health. Dr.
Right.
Weston Price has been talking about this for 50 years. The fact that there's no attention placed on the things that he learned then and was sharing with the world is just mind-boggling to me. And why all of these other doctors are now having to recreate this and put it out there with books, because there's no stream of movement for information that is contrary to the mainstream narrative. So these are doctors that have taken their time to write books to put out into the world, because there's no other way for them to get the truth out. And so if you're going to your doctor expecting to get told the truth about nutrition and health and how to prevent disease, you're not going to get it. This might be another 50 years down the road, right? When they figured out that it was not good to x-ray mothers' babies that in mothers' abdomens when they were pregnant. When they finally discovered that that was harmful, x-rays were harmful to an unborn baby, it still took 40 years to actually stop doing it. So this was a discovery that was made way before they ever said, oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And this is how long it takes. Things take a really long time to come out into the mainstream, to come out into the medical schools, to be taught differently.
They come out, and even if it, like Ansel Keys, right? He made a study on fat, and this is what threw our society, as far as I'm concerned, for a huge curveball with fat, because this man published a study because he was too prideful to say he was wrong about fat being good for humans. That
it was
changed
a faulty
the course
study
of our,
to begin with.
It was a faulty study, and that study changed the course of our history, and we are suffering today because of it.
It's appalling. It's just like you said, he single-handedly changed the history of dietary practices in America, and probably throughout the world, because everybody wants to follow America, right? That's what's happening in Germany.
The world follows America. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's really unfortunate when it comes to health and wellness that any other country would want to follow our practices, but nonetheless, that's what happens. And there's literally thousands and thousands of studies now proving that this is real. This is real science, scientific evidence. You can't ignore this. You can either be duped by the mainstream narrative, or you can look back at what has been said all along, really. But you have to dig it up. You have to dig for yourself, or you have to find somebody you really trust that's going to help you through this, because it's not readily available. And thank God with the internet, that is a positive force. For everything you hear in the media, you can pretty much just believe the opposite.
If I wanted to be doing this for popularity reasons, I would be a vegan, and I would be putting canola oil on my food. And that's the reality. Like, what's popular right now in the world is veganism, vegetarianism, and eating, what do you call those burger things? That's just so sickening to me that when has processing food of any kind ever done us any good? It never has.
Right. Never.
Processing food is never a good idea. And the more refined it becomes, the worse our species becomes. And can you like meat is one of those last remaining foods that has not been refined and processed and mimicked. We have everything. We've done that to pretty much virtually everything else. We can take the taste of a fruit and put it in a Fruit Loop, and there's no connection to fruit and a Fruit Loop. We are doing that now with meat. This is insanity. And this is where I get passionate, because I wish I could just tell the world this stuff. Like, don't listen to this. Like, you're actually going to kill future generations by doing this. Like, most of my daughter's friends are vegetarians. Like, my daughter's 9 years old. And I remember being that girl too. I was passionate about being vegetarian, but little did we know that that's not serving us. It's been a trend for a very long time now to be vegetarian. But it's not optimal. It's not the way our species was designed to eat. Bottom line, look at history. Just look at the science. Look at the history.
Millions of years we ate bison that were free roaming in North America, and we ate animals, and we were hunters and gatherers, and we hunted. Most of our food came from ruminant animals. So now that we're making meat in laboratories and producing, fake food, essentially, it's just something to be aware of. Okay, if you're eating fake food, no, we are intimately connected with nature, and we need to get back to nature. The closer it is to its natural state, the healthier it's going to be for our body, period.
It's not some fad thing. It's like, I'm choosing to eat things in their whole form. I'm super passionate about this because it's healed my life. It's healed me. I have faith that it can save the planet, because as we were talking about, like, it's not just about diet. This is like, we have to regenerate our soil and replenish our soil. And the only way to do that is to keep ruminant animals grazing and pooping and creating compost. So it seems, that we could do multiple podcasts on these topics, but this is my passion, and it's my life. It's my lifestyle. And along with my dietary things that I do, I have a spiritual practice, and I'm doing a lot of cold plunging and sweating and different lifestyle practices as well that I incorporate in, that have really helped heal me as well. So thank you so much for having me. And
yeah, we have so much to talk about. So definitely check us out on Instagram. We're often doing lives there, sharing more tidbits about our daily practices and whatnot. But Elise, you're amazing. You're such an inspiration, and you're just a badass. I just can't believe that you've come through all of this. You're cancer free. Your periods are normal. Your poops are normal. Your headaches are gone. Your sore throats are gone. Your chronic sinus infections and bloodshot red eyes are gone. Gastritis is gone. It's such a miracle, and it is so much more than just diet. You guys, it's not easy, and you need an army of allies to help guide you.
Remember, food is your medicine. It doesn't have to be a treat every meal. And that's one thing that I'd leave you with, that I've really discovered, is we expect that every meal should have every color on, you should have every color on your plate, and every different selection should be tasty. And that's a mistake I think that we make. So I don't eat for enjoyment anymore. I eat because it nourishes and fuels my day and my body. So I'll leave you with that.
Awesome, Elise. You're incredible. I love you so much. Namaste. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Mwah.